we want to take a look at starting a new company. And so first we're going to pull out the company that we're going to start. And you should find this company on Campus Cruiser under Shared Files. Okay, so here we have the company information, and we'll be flipping back and forth from that. And then we also need to start the Sage 50, also known as formerly as Peachtree, and so we'll start that up as well. Now when you start it up, if you've already had another company that you were working on before, that company is going to show up on your screen, and so you'll have to say File and Close to get rid of that old company that you were working on, and then you'll come back to this screen here, and we're going to say Create a New Company. Okay, this is the information you're going to have in front of you before you proceed, and we'll hit Next. Now it wants the company name, so I'm going to take a look on here, and this is Reiki Healing Arts, and don't forget to put your initials in there. Okay, and this is a sole proprietorship. Now here's an address and a phone number as well, although for this YouTube I'm not going to bother putting those in. So I've got my initials and then Reiki Healing Arts, and this is a sole proprietorship. Those are the two minimum things that you're going to want on here. And then of course for a project, if you've got other information like addresses, you would put that in there. Okay, now typically most of the time we're going on this screen to build our own chart of accounts. If you only have a small number in your chart of accounts, it's far easier to just do them from scratch than to use one of their sample charts of accounts and then have to delete a bunch of accounts and change numbers and all that kind of thing. So most of our projects will be build your own chart of accounts. We will discuss later in the semester about using a sample. Here it needs for you to choose an accounting method. GAAP requires the accrual method of accounting, which means that we're recording revenue when it's earned. So when we did the job or when we delivered the product, that's when we earned it. That's when we're going to record the sale. So if I mow Mrs. Smith's lawn today, but it's next month before Mrs. Smith pays me, today is when I earned the revenue, so today is when I'm going to credit sales. Now she's not giving me cash today, so I'm going to debit accounts receivable. Okay, then next month when she pays me, I would debit the cash and credit accounts receivable, but the sale, the revenue, got recorded this month when it was earned. And that's part of the matching principle, which is a core part of the accrual basis of accounting, and that is what GAAP requires. Expenses are recorded when they're incurred. So when we use the lights and receive a bill is when we're going to record that expense, as opposed to when we actually pay the bill, which might be next month. Okay, so that's accrual, and most of our projects in Accounting 240 will be on the accrual system. Now there may be some small companies which are not required by law to use GAAP, and so they don't have to be on the accrual system for that reason. And if they don't have bank financing, the bank won't require them to be on to use GAAP either. And so some of those really small companies might be on the cash basis of accounting, which means if we mowed Mrs. Smith's lawn today, but she's not giving us the cash to next month, we're just going to wait till next month. And then we'll record a debit to cash and a credit to sales. And I record the sales when I actually receive the cash, not when I actually earned it, the way the accrual system is. The cash basis of accounting is not GAAP. And so those public companies are required to use GAAP, and also usually if you get bank financing, the bank will usually require you to use GAAP. We do have one project that will be on the cash basis of accounting, but the rest of them will be on accrual basis. This is talks about the posting method, and when we do things in real life, if we are putting in 1,000 sales invoices, and after each one I have to click save, and then it posts, or I can punch in 1,000 and then post it all at one time. So I can post each sales invoice. As soon as I do that invoice, it posts, and then I do the second invoice and it posts. Okay, but that can be more time consuming, even though it's just a tiny bit of time consuming. When you're talking about 1,000 of them, that adds up. Okay, and so in that case, we may want to do batch posting, where we input the 1,000 sales invoices and then we post all of them at the same time. Now, here in Accounting 240, we will not be doing thousands of anything. And so we will use the real-time posting method, which means that things are going to post to the general ledger as soon as we hit the save button for each transaction separately. This is talking about your accounting period. Most companies have a 12-month accounting period. Now, they might not be on the calendar 12 months. In other words, it might not be January 1st to December 31st. If you have a large retail company, that company is required by GAAP to count its inventory, physically count its inventory once per year at the end of the fiscal year. So they want to choose a fiscal year that ends when their inventory is at its lowest point, because counting inventory for a large place takes a lot of time, effort, and money. So a big retail place, say a JCPenney or something like that, they're going to want to have the end of their fiscal year be maybe January, the end of January, the end of February, the end of March. So if their fiscal year ends in the end of February, their fiscal year would go from March 1st to February 28th. But it's still based on 12 one-month periods. Okay? There are a few companies that they say, oh, our fiscal year end is the last Tuesday of February. So this year, the last Tuesday of February might be the 28th, but next Tuesday, the last Tuesday of February might be the 24th. So it isn't a whole month then. And so in that case, you would choose accounting periods that do not match the calendar months. In that case, however, we do not have any projects that need that. So all of your projects for class will use the 12 monthly accounting periods. And we hit next. This is asking for what is the first period of the fiscal year. So if our fiscal year went from March 1st to February 28th, we would put March in as being our first period of the fiscal year. A sole proprietor, in general, usually has to use the calendar year. The IRS requires that. And so generally a sole proprietor's first period is going to be January because they're required to go from January 1st to December 31st. They're not allowed to have a March 1st to February 28th fiscal year like JCPenney or some other large retailer can choose their fiscal year. And so for this particular project, Reiki Healing Arts was a sole proprietor, and many of your projects are, not all of them, but many of them are, and so many of your projects will have January as the first period. But you may have one or two projects where it has a fiscal year and you have to put in the first period of that fiscal year here. Also note under here, some of these notations here in bold, this cannot be changed after your company is created. So if one of those projects that has a fiscal year and you ended up just leaving it in January and it was supposed to be March, and you hit the next button and then you hit the finish button, you're going to have to start over. You're going to have to just delete that company and re-input a fresh company, okay? Because your stuff is going to be messed up. Alright, we hit next, and then at this point, you know, I could go back. I could still go back and correct anything that needs to be corrected. Once I hit this finish button, some of those things like the fiscal year can't be changed. Okay? So I hit the fiscal year and it's going to create a shell on this hard drive for this particular company. And then I'll start putting transactions into that shell. Once it's gone through and created that shell, it's going to open that company for me. It'll take a minute, so you have to be patient. You're just going to look at the screen now. It says opening KD Reiki Healing Arts. Okay? Now this screen here is going to show up, and you don't need that. Okay? This screen here, you can click this here, don't show the screen at startup, okay? You can if you want to. This shows you all the different things that you have to do, but a lot of this stuff that we don't have to do for every project, and so I tend not to use this setup guide myself. But if you prefer to use it, it's showing you right now, it's highlighting chart of accounts, because that's your next start. Says start here, okay? This is your next step, okay? Alright, so now we're here on the screen, and up at top it says KD Reiki Healing Arts, okay? Now, there's going to be a couple things I'm going to do, and I'm going to go into banking, chart of accounts, new account. And in the Reiki Healing Arts, we were told the chart of accounts, and there will be a second YouTube that will go over putting in the chart of accounts. Once you have the chart of accounts in, you're going to go under reports and look at the chart of accounts. Right now there isn't anything here, but and then you will save it. Here's a PDF. If you are somewhere at a computer that will not save a PDF, you can save it as an Excel, but I prefer the PDF. And you should of course save that as a PDF. It will save it onto this hard drive, but it's also important for you to save it to your jump drive as well. And then that's what you're going to submit to Campus Cruiser. If you have beginning balances, now here in Reiki Healing Arts there are no beginning balances. But if you have beginning balances, this bar right here, account beginning balances, you would click on that and put in your beginning balances. And we'll also discuss that in detail in another YouTube. Now, once you have your chart of accounts, the next step is going to be to start your transactions. And you're going to want to make sure that this period bar is on the period that you want to use. So if I look at Reiki Healing Arts and I look and see, okay, transactions for January. So these transactions are in the month of January, and this period bar is on January. But let's say you wanted transactions for March. Well, you would click on this period bar, go down to March, and then say OK. Okay, and now the period bar says March. Now if I go to put a general journal entry in, it's going to bring up a March date. If your screens are bringing up a date that's not in the month that you want it to be in, it's a big sign that your period bar is on the wrong period, and you need to fix that first before you go on. This concludes the first YouTube on creating a company.